Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. To the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers, how the heck are ya? Summer is wrapping up. Kids are getting ready to go back to school. How the heck are y'all doing? How are you managing? I think you're really going to find this episode interesting. What I hear all introverts and most HSPs talk about is how much they hate small talk. Jen and I peel this apart and look at different aspects that may go into small talk that I don't know that we talk about. Is the topic interesting to me? Is the other person engaging in the conversation? Do I have internal dialogue that's going on that's making me feel awkward and uncomfortable? And I think that there are some times when small talk can be really helpful. And I think that there are topics that we just may not be interested in. And so it may not be always about small talk. And I don't know that it's always possible to go deep with people. I think we like to talk about things that we feel interested in and we want to feel engaged and we want to feel like there's some mutuality in our conversations. But I sometimes wonder if things get a little bit messy and what we lump together as being small talk is maybe about other things. And I have to tell you from myself personally, there are times when I really enjoy talking about things that are not deep, intense emotions, but they're things that I'm interested in and I want to engage in it with other people. So I'm curious to know what you think about this. And Jen has a really great perspective about kind of feeling akin to a turtle and always being at home in her shell because she's a turtle. And I love that analogy. So I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. So I think we'll just get to it. And now on to the show. Hey, Jen, how are you?
Hi, Patricia. I'm doing okay.
Yeah.
How are you?
I think I'm okay. I recorded an episode before we got on. I think I'm in my kind of tasky focus brain. I think I'm okay. I got in the pool this morning. Brenda and I are working on part of rolling for our kayaks. I got my spray skirt, which is going to prevent water from coming into my kayak, but it makes it a little bit harder to get out of if I get upside down and I can't get out. But I'm just working through my fears. So I think I'm okay. How about you?
I love this. I've got to come kayaking with you someday.
Come to San Diego.
It sounds so thrilling to do a roll. I'm again in awe. That's amazing. Good for you.
Thanks. I'm excited and I have some fears about it.
Yeah.
Just
facing your fears like that. Oof.
Just keep walking through
wonderful. Yeah.
How are you doing?
Me, I'm okay. I've had a pretty interesting day. I woke up this morning with a lot more spaciousness in my day than I was I knew it yesterday, but it's more spacious of a day than I'm used to having. And it was kind of funny because I'm sitting there wondering how I can gift myself a really nice, nourishing morning. So I have these ideas about getting up and maybe doing some yoga or going for a walk. And I grabbed my phone and played Candy Crush instead.
Been there, done that.
Which made me feel very curious about myself, which I was happy with that as a response.
Mm-hmm.
And I did get a good night's sleep, which is important. I've been trying to focus on just real basic self-care again, because life gets so busy. And next thing I know, I've strung together a week of late nights or just not taking care of myself and running from one thing to another. And so I had a chance to take a breath. And I made some good choices as far as going to bed. But I was just laughing at myself and even being able to be with that part of me that has that edge.
Mm-hmm.
That wants to do better and trying to work with her a little skillfully. And then, as you know, I've been working on resting, right? Not just physical rest, but resting in the security of my connections and my relationships. And had an interesting thing again this morning once I put Candy Crush down. And I've deleted that app from my phone so many times. It's really, I don't know. I should nerd out and just research the crap out of what is it about this stuff. But
I think it's the dopamine hits that
usually,
we get. It's quick dopamine hits, and especially if you are dopamine deficient like many of us are. And I've done the same
oof,
thing, you know. So I hear you. I
yeah,
feel you.
thanks. I love this, like being vulnerable and talking about that because I'm not proud of it, but it's real. So here I am. I'm also curious whenever I'm playing it, like I kind of have this question in the back of my mind, like, what is it I don't want to feel right now?
Mm-hmm.
So I had this moment of a little bit of that not feeling quite so secure, which is something that happens to me on the daily, most days.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this interesting response where I put my hand on my heart and I leaned back. I love doing like the back of the body meditation. So I kind of leaned back into having this secure moment with myself, which felt really beautiful.
Yeah.
And then I put Candy Crush down and poloed you about it, I think is what I did this morning.
And can you explain what having a secure moment with yourself looks like if people aren't familiar with that language?
I My sense of it this morning was when there was a ripple across my heart of interpersonal insecurity, right?
Mm-hmm.
My gremlins, we've talked about them. Like, am I good enough? Is this okay? Is that going to happen? What if this happens? Like all the things that I would normally work really hard to control or overperform or, go do something about. So my sense of it, and so my challenge is to rest. My challenge is like, look, just rest in the attachment. You don't have to hustle. Just breathe. Like it's okay. It's okay to be you. It's okay. You're safe. You're okay. I have a nervous system,
Mm-hmm.
right? I have a highly sensitive system that gets those ripples like on top of a lake, imagine, right? And so my visceral sense of it this morning was like it's just taking a little bit of a dive down where it's quieter and connecting with myself. I've got me. I'm okay. Or even if I'm not okay, I've got me.
Yeah. Yeah. Not trying to fix it, not trying to change it, not trying to do anything to work your way out of it. How many times have you heard clients like, "What do I do? What do I do to get out of this?" And how many conversations we have. So if you're my client, you've said that I'm not shaming you.
No, we've all been there.
Yeah.
And sometimes the best thing to do is to be still.
Yeah. Just be with it. Yeah.
Be still, feel your feelings, stay curious about them and yourself. So I had it this morning in a very, it just seemed to happen, which was kind of cool.
Mhm.
Because a lot of times I'm like, it's an intention or it's a practice, right? Self-compassion is a practice. It's an effort. And then to have it sort of come online early in the morning like that without me really muscling it, it felt
Sure.
pretty good.
Sure. I love
It
that.
was, it's after a lot of practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing.
Thanks for asking. Thanks for listening.
Sure. What I really want to look into today is this concept of small talk. And I want to tease it apart a little bit because I know that most HSPs are not really into small talk. But I think that what we don't define is, are they subjects that interest us or don't interest us? Because there are certain things that I think are small talk that I could talk about forever because they're more special interests to me. They're things that I'm interested in, I'm fascinated with. And we have this thing about like, I don't like small talk and I want to go deep, but I don't think we always have to go deep. And there are times when I think it's really beneficial to be able to make conversation with people that isn't necessarily deep. Sometimes it's good for us too, but I think there's this confusion, at least in my mind, between is it something that I'm not like for me, I'm not a sports person. So pretty much most things that are sports related are not going to hold my interest. Like I just don't care. But
Mm.
it's not because it's small talk, it's because I don't have any frame of reference. If you want to talk about animal behavior or cooking or candy always fascinates me, children. Like there are certain things that are really interesting to me, kayaking, then I'm interested. And it's not that talking about kayaks, we talk about deep feelings. It's chit chat, it's small talk, but we can go deep on certain subjects. So I'm curious to know what your thoughts are about that.
I love your I guess I would call it a reframe, but I feel like it's listening to you right now, it's like it's just an accuracy frame. I think you're right. Because someone could have an incredibly in-depth conversation about sports, and I mean, I'm pretty similar. I would just kind of glaze over unless it was like maybe some of the psychology of sports or performance or how mindfulness is used in sports. I mean, I'm sure I can find little areas that I might be interested in that would be like an intersection
I'm imagining you at a
with
bar, at a
someone.
sports bar, going up to people that are watching it, talking about, let's talk about the mindfulness of this football game. And then
I should try
I
that.
think you should.
I wonder if that would go over well. Probably not. I do love watching sports, but I'm watching the people watching the
Hmm.
sports. And I'm curious about the players and their facial
Yeah.
expressions. And so, I mean, when I think about small talk, and I want to get back to what you said, but when I think about small talk, I think about how do I make it fun and interesting for me?
Hmm.
And so you're right on. You just had like this accuracy moment. I'm like, bah! Like it's not that I have an issue with small talk. It's whether or not I'm interested in it.
Hmm.
And then how can I make it interesting for me? So if someone's talking about something that I'm really not interested in, but I'm interested maybe in them as a person, or I don't know, it's funny. That's where I go. I'm like, in order to make it, I don't want to say tolerable. That sounds awful.
Palatable.
But I try to find, yeah, we're just not going to I have ADHD. So I guess maybe it's more an HSP thing that just sort of like rich inner world will
Hmm.
take over. And I'll like completely check out. And that gets kind of embarrassing halfway through the conversation when
Hmm.
you, get asked a question or something. So I don't like it when that happens. So I will find something it's something interesting, exactly what you're saying. So I wonder if that reframe is really helpful. I know it already is for me. I can totally, I don't know that I'll ever feel cringy about small talk again.
Well, I think the other aspects of it are, if you and I are engaged in a conversation, like we're not friends, but we're acquaintances, or we don't have the kind of relationship that we have. And I'm giving you a lot of information about something that I'm fascinated with, basically info dumping, but that's not your interest, and there's not mutual consent, then that also tends to not be really enjoyable if it's not something that you're interested in. I mean, I think that there's this idea of reciprocity when we have communication. I mean, I hear people say, like, I don't want to talk about the weather. Sometimes, because I work with people that are all over the world, when we have group, I'm kind of curious to know what's the weather where everybody is at. And sometimes that really annoys people, but I'm kind of curious about that kind of stuff. So I think there are more factors that are involved when we talk about small talk than just the content.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I had this experience that I'm going to be vague because I'm going to lose people that want to spend time with me if I talk about everybody on the podcast. But there's somebody in my life who's a little bit on the periphery, but is not someone who really enjoys deep conversation, does not like talking about feelings, just very, very, we're wired very differently. And there was this unexpected occasion where we weren't planning on spending time together. It would be equivalent of having to take a car ride somewhere with someone that you weren't really planning on, and it's just the two of you. And
Mhm.
I had to anticipate this and kind of know, like, okay, don't go to these places, but you can go to these places. It ended up being really lovely, and we found a lot of common ground that we talked about. And there's something about that that almost feels esteeming. It's almost like a little bit of a challenge of how can I create conversation that's going to be stimulating and enjoyable without going to these places that I know don't work. And as the weeks have gone by, it's really ended up being something very positive. There's a little bit more to the story, but like I said, I can't I can't really tell you too much. But it didn't take 10 years for me to be included in something that it normally would take 10 years for people to be included in this arena, because that's just what it takes. I know that's vague, but your turn. Go ahead.
I do like framing that as kind of a creative challenge, where to find that common ground. You make me think of, I don't know when it was, maybe I was 20 or something when my sister told me, like, why don't you just talk about the weather? Like, because there were lots of, I thought, deep conversations that just weren't. either weren't interesting or wasn't a language that people around me spoke at the time. And so that's kind of like the steering away, and to not be, I think when I was 20, probably hurt or offended by that, or longing
Mhm.
for that. And to go back to your metaphor about testing, right? Testing the relationship and where it can go and where it can't, accepting that. I do a lot of consent these days. I was talking to, I actually, I have had two conversations, one with either neighbor, and one I remember asking, because I don't know if it's ADHD or what it is, but like I will start to ramp up and hyper focus, and I will be like, okay, I'm going to totally nerd out on you here. And is this okay? Are you interested in what I have to say? Because if someone did that to me in a topic I wasn't interested in, I would feel awkward or trapped or probably resentful. So I like asking for permission.
Mhm.
And I think that that's neighborly.
Mhm.
That's what I was talking. I have the loveliest neighbors. And then I just had one. I said one a few minutes ago before we got on, because I was walking my dog. Just a brief conversation about my dog howling and me being apologetic. And then offering, if they ever needed anything, because they're new to the neighborhood,
Mhm.
make sure they have my phone number and stuff like that. So those are kind of more pragmatic things. But also with my kids going to new schools this year, two different schools, like I've had all these like circles of parents to have small talk with, and,
Mhm.
and to try to get to know. And I think the more I can be a soft landing place for myself,
Mhm.
because I do some very socially awkward things,
Mhm.
and people will comment about it, and it'll be kind of funny later, and I'll be like, yeah, I think I said to one dad, I think everybody's in my head. I knew him and his younger daughter. I think the older daughter was with me, and I was getting the kids takeout, and they were going to the restaurant, and I just walked up to his partner and introduced myself like as like a strange woman, but I knew they were going to be there because we had talked about it, but she didn't know. So it was really awkward when he said something about it. I'm like, yeah, I know I'm not in everybody's not in my head, and sometimes I don't realize that. And so the ability to kind of not poke fun at myself too bad, but take myself lightly.
Mhm.
And I think that that's a piece of these social situations. I know I can get, if I'm not taking myself lightly, I can get myself very socially anxious
Mhm.
and uncomfortable.
Mhm.
I got invited to like this little, I didn't realize it was a cocktail party. And I show up in my regular clothes, and everyone else is in sundresses, and I'm like, oops.
Mhm.
Right. But then just stepping in, and the hostess was so gracious. She was
Mm.
beautiful. And just remembering to fall back in that it's really okay to be me,
Mhm.
no matter
Mhm.
what. And that's the same thing I did this morning in my bed. That's a secure attachment with
I
myself.
love that. I love that. I struggle a little bit more with that, and I think historically, because I overfunction so much and I'm a people pleaser, I'm really great at connecting, but I think I really worked hard to get curious and to engage with people, but I find these days that I'm tired, like I'm just exhausted and I don't want to overfunction. And then there's this where I feel like you've got that secure attachment to yourself where I feel awkward, like, what do we talk about? And because I'm hanging out with some people that are not quite my people, I don't want to be, I've been told I'm nosy, sometimes curious, like I don't really know where we can go with things. And, and then it was interesting the other day, I was in a group of people and we were all kind of meandering about, and I ended up meandering over to someone, and last week we spent some time chatting. I shared about some things and they kind of meandered away from me. And I it was really hard to not make up a story in my head, because where I wanted to go is I offended them. They weren't interested in what I talked about. They didn't want to be with me. I just went down this and I thought, okay, you're making up a story in your head. Maybe they're having a hard day. Maybe they want to be alone. I don't know what that is. There are people that really enjoy being with me, but I definitely run through that insecurity of, do I fit in? Do I belong? How come these other people are talking? Other people are paired up. How come I'm not paired up? I mean, just that whole thing, but it doesn't naturally come back to that secure attachment, but I have to talk myself back to that place so that I'm okay with it.
Yeah, it can be hard. I mean, I feel that. And I've certainly told myself those stories as well. And definitely run the misfit archetype my whole life,
Mhm.
always have. I think a lot of HSPs do, because, right, we're only 15 to 20% of the population.
Right.
So we do feel a little bit like the odd duck,
Mhm.
right? And I don't know, lately I go into that spin. So instead of talking myself out of it, I'm like, yep, I am an acquired taste. I am not for everybody. And how do I just breathe and smile and I'm trying to, I guess it's still overperforming, but like I'll just try to sort of push out an energy of goodwill
Mhm.
kind of. And I definitely have embraced the social awkwardness. And sometimes one thing that'll break through is talking about that.
Mhm.
That I don't know, it's kind of risky, but
Not in this
I
group.
have had that
I
work.
couldn't do that.
Yeah, some groups you really can't.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've certainly gotten many a raised eyebrow, but I think I wear them like little mini badges of honor these days.
Mhm.
Like and that it's okay. I credit all of that to the dedicated self-compassion practice.
I love that. Sometimes groups are really kind of confusing for me. I feel like one-on-one, or if it's people that I was gonna say that I see regularly that I know that I can ask things about, which part of that is true. But there is this sometimes I just think groups mystify me.
Oh, completely. Yes. I'm trying to turn that from being something that's intimidating into something that's fascinating. And I'm not always successful. Like I will
Yeah,
definitely and a lot of it does have to do with my energy too.
yeah.
There are plenty of times where I'll bail last minute. I'm like, I felt bad. One of my longest friends, Julia, she longest long-term friendship
Mhm,
is a social butterfly and she knows before I know when I'm not coming.
mhm, mhm.
And it's those friendships that can just love me through that and understand that because it does take a lot of energy.
Yeah,
It really does. And
yeah.
there's many times where I just, nope. Mm-mm.
So in my head, I feel like we started out with this, small talk doesn't have to be a bad thing, and if it's stuff you're interested in, and then it kind of went to this thing about energy, and then I wanted to talk about why our energy goes down, but I feel like that pulls away, so maybe we'll save that to another time. So I think I want to stick a little bit more to this concept of small talk and how do we find those places of connection and how do we make it work, even if we're tired, without having to overwork it.
Yeah, that's where I just put it out there. Like, I'm tired. I'm doing
Yeah,
this tired. And I won't, for me, faking it is the worst thing.
yeah.
That'll send me into tears in the corner if I'm trying to fake
Hmm.
it, you know? Um, Nothing pushes me into more small talk situations than doing it for my kids.
Say a little bit more about that.
Showing up at their things,
Hmm.
getting to know their friends' parents. That's an interesting arena because there isn't something besides the children that are
Hmm.
bringing us together. So it's not like my mindfulness group where it's mindfulness that it gets sort of
Hmm.
sometimes we've got these like built-in things to talk about. So it can be really, really difficult to find what to even talk about.
Hmm.
Like where do you even start? I love starting with the weather.
Yeah.
I think I do a bit of kind of reading energy,
Hmm.
trying to ask questions instead of it feeling all this pressure for me to come up with a topic.
Yeah. Well, I think sometimes too people are awkward and uncomfortable, but we don't know that. So I'm trying to fish and get something started and they're not really reciprocating. Like sometimes you meet someone and they're just kind of so warm and effusive that you want to be around them and you want to engage. But if I'm feeling like, oh, am I going to find a place where I fit? And I try and connect with somebody who's in that same place, but neither one of us is naming it and it doesn't go anywhere, then there's just that internal dialogue of like, oh, oh, this is flopping.
Yeah. I wonder if that's another assumption that's helpful to make is that everybody maybe is as socially awkward as I am, right?
That's a hard one for me to swallow.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if it's true, but it's helpful.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about this group that I hang out with, and they all seem to be able to talk with each other about all these things, but I just always feel like I'm on the periphery for most of what they talk about. And it's not a bad thing. I just have to go like these aren't my people in most circumstances. But trying to figure out like where do I fit in and how do I and maybe in a group you don't have to work as hard with small talk because other people will pick it up and then if you find a place where you fit in then that does work. I think what sticks in my mind is just when that pain comes up of like, oh, what's wrong? I want to connect. And I think the pain comes from a deep place of wanting connection, like really wanting
Yeah.
connection and not knowing how to do it, or these aren't my people, or the timing isn't right. And I don't know that, I don't trust that I'm fine. And even if it looks like they're connecting about all kinds of things, that it's okay that those aren't things that I know about or can participate in.
Yeah, and just knowing that you belong even if you are in the periphery, because the group is
Hmm.
allowed to have people on the periphery, right? And
Yeah.
I know sometimes with my insecurities, that sense of like, okay, there's the stamp of approval, like there's the evidence that I belong, because it's hard to feel like I just belong, like
Yeah.
that I have as much a right to be there as anybody else, even if I'm not actively contributing to the
Yeah.
conversation, but that I can be there. It's funny, you're making me think of like when I was again in my 20s, I remember doing some shamanic journeying with a bunch of my friends. You get this spirit animal is given to you. We went to this beautiful shaman that came to visit when I was in acupressure shiatsu school, and long time ago. And my one friend gets like a great horned owl, and someone got a wolf, and I got a turtle, which I really loved. But that symbol of being kind of at home wherever you are,
Hmm.
and to be able to rest, to
Hmm.
rest if you're resting there in the periphery, that can be okay. And until someone someone gets up and asks me to leave, I am allowed I'm allowed to be here, and I'm contributing, right? I'm contributing energy, I'm contributing attention.
Hmm.
And that's hard. That's hard. I don't always that's aspirational, probably I would say a good 80% of the time for me.
Yeah.
Maybe even higher
Yeah.
in a rough patch.
Well, and I think you make a really good point that if you tend to be someone who's a leader, like I tend to be a leader, and so I either have that fear of too much or I'm in my element and I feel really confident, but I also have that wound of not enough. And so it's that binary of, I'm either leading or I'm not participating and I have nothing to share. And what you said is every group needs listeners, every group needs supporters, that there is a role in that. And if everybody were all trying to lead at the same time, that doesn't work either.
Yes. That your very presence, is a gift to the group.
Yeah. And I think what goes on for me is that when I have that belief that I should be engaged and I'm not, then I tend to flip into that narrative of there's something wrong with me. And what I would imagine is if people use the framework of small talk, it's like, this is boring me and I don't want to be here, as opposed to knowing that it's okay that things aren't as interesting or this isn't something that I have a lot to contribute to, and knowing that that's okay and resting in that, kind of like you said.
Yeah. You're making me think of this beautiful little concert that went on in my neighborhood the other day that I
Mm-hmm.
think I sent you a lot of
You did.
video of,
Yeah.
and how much I guess it's almost like we're putting this pressure on ourselves to be the performers
Mm-hmm.
and not realizing how important and integral the audience is,
Yeah. Yeah.
and just showing up. And I don't know. I suspect sometimes, depending on my mood, there I'm a lot more active in the conversation than others.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if that might be the case for you too.
Yeah. As we're talking about this, I'm thinking about I used to belong to a group and it was challenging for me to go because I didn't have like my internal boundaries that things would be said in this group and I didn't have the ability to go like, "Oh, that doesn't relate to me." So I'm wondering if some of this challenges the internal boundaries and what my internal dialogue is. That it feels like if I were resting in a secure attachment, whether people were talking about things that interested me or didn't interest me, or I was participating or not, I would feel secure in who I am, that I'm there and I'm present, and kinda like in your turtle shell. Like, I'm here in my turtle shell and I'm can pop my
You're
head in, I can pop
safe.
my head out, and it's
Mhm.
okay. But I think it's that the dialogue that goes on in my head that creates the unrest, and I think it's easy to organize that around small talk, but I think it has to do with when I'm one-on-one and I feel connected, it's empowering and it makes me feel good and I want more of it, and when I'm in a larger group and don't have control over that, I often make it about me and don't feel as secure, as opposed to knowing that I'm fine, and sometimes we connect and sometimes we don't.
Yeah, and that's all okay. I love that. That's some pretty deep insight into yourself, and into your process. We should polo about that next time it happens. Like,
What I
what's
really want to say is, ugh.
the story you're telling yourself about? Well,
Ugh.
it's funny. You make me think of, like, just today. So today I had a colleague kind of meeting. It's a regular meeting, and someone that I love and respect. I contribute. I did contribute to the conversation, and as did several other people. It's probably a group of, I don't know, maybe 7 people, 8 people, and one of the leaders, someone whose esteem matters to me, complimented someone else's contribution and not mine. And I definitely had a little bit of a story that I started to kick up about that. Yeah, so I just want to join with you. And I suspect that you and I are not alone in doing this. I was able to let it go. And I'm still curious about it. And it is
Sure.
probably, honestly, something I'm going to track from meeting to meeting because they happen regularly.
Sure.
But I do love this group of people and being really curious about myself as well as the group dynamic.
Yeah.
How is energy shared? How is information shared? The tone that different people take. Like, I get really curious about all the undercurrents.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever going to want to talk with me ever again.
Yeah. 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 We probably need to wrap up, but it's interesting. As you were talking, I was thinking part of the dynamic that goes on in some of these groups that I'm in is being included or not being included, and how important I want that to be, and how somebody that I'm close with has been included. And I can tell this person, I want to be invited. And I am being included now. And something happened recently where somebody said, well, how come Patricia isn't here? And the person that I'm close to said, well, she wasn't invited. After I said, like, I want to go, but I'm not going to ask to go, but I want to go. And so it was nice that there was kind of an invitation that was extended to me. So I'm just reflecting on, this wound that I have of, do I fit in? Do I belong? Am I connected? Am I not? And if you look at the external evidence, I do belong and I
You
am being
belong.
included. And so I'm still running this internal dialogue about not fitting in. So I think it's an opportunity for me to look at that and do some healing and some kind of grounding into myself around that.
Groups are fascinating because if everyone is pretty much that you belong, they may not be making formal invitations, just assuming you're going to come along.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
There are some specifics about this group about somebody in the group was not invited for 10 years. So there is some very real, some very real stuff that's there. But like I said, I want to be vague so that I have friends and I still am included.
Yes. Yes.
Stop talking about it on that podcast of yours.
Well, lots of
anyways.
love and to
Yeah.
everyone that's been energetically referenced.
Yeah. Anything else before we wrap it up?
No, my dear. Thank you.
Thanks for being here today. Yeah.
Thanks
Always
for
love
having
it.
me. Me too.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Hey again. So I'm curious to know what you thought. Did that activate anything negative for you? Can you identify with having that poor internal boundaries and making up stories that really end up not supporting you? I think Jen and I make a really nice balance because there are so many things that she says where she loves her being different and can celebrate being awkward and feeling settled in herself. And I tend to be a little bit more in my head and have to talk myself through things a little bit more. So I think we're a really nice blend of the yin and the yang. So I'm curious to know what you thought, what your thoughts are about groups. Are you still firm that you don't like chit chat? Did anything change for you? Just curious. If you are interested in connecting with other HSPs, if you feel like you don't have a community, you don't have people around you who really get you, you're struggling with things and you want to learn more about that trait, the next online Hsp course is going to be starting September 12th and it will go through November 14th, 2020. Registration starts August 17th and it ends August 31st. The first week of registration is early bird registration. The way that the course works is we meet on Mondays from 3 to 4:20 Pacific Standard Time or Pacific Daylight Time. And every week, Jen and I recorded videos on each of the topics that we have for the course. I'm teaching this course. Jen isn't teaching one, but I send out an email every week that has a video that talks about the subject. There's extra resources if you want to look at extra information about that topic. There are questions for reflection if you want. Everything is optional. The topics that we cover are mindfulness and self-compassion, which Jen talks a lot about just in general, identifying the negative messages and turning them into positives or strengths, perfectionism, embracing our emotions, self-care is non-negotiable, boundaries, communication, authenticity, and vulnerability, and creating a lifestyle that honors the highly sensitive person. Everything in this course is optional, and what I hear people appreciate the most is if you're tired, you can show up tired. You don't have to have your camera on. You don't have to participate. You can lay down during the whole thing. You can choose not to share. We show up in the world having to pull it all together and be like the other 80%, and this really is a course where you get to choose what works for you. What I find is people have this sense of connection and hearing other people that are wired like they are. Obviously, as HSPs, there's a tremendous amount of variability. I mean, look at Jen and I, that we're both HSPs and we show up in the world very differently. We have different wounding, we have different experiences, our temperament is different. There's variability, but being in a group of people who get you and to be able to talk about something and have somebody go, oh, yeah, I have that same experience. Or most of the time, we're waiting for somebody to say they don't understand or to tell us we're being too sensitive or we're overthinking or we're making a big deal out of things. To be in an environment that just is really nurturing and supportive and a really soft place to land can be so healing. Some of the groups have continued to meet after the 10 weeks is over. I can't guarantee that that's going to happen for your group, but the possibility is there, and COVID has kind of turned things on its head. Many of us are feeling disconnected and really just wanting to have a place where we can feel seen and heard and to rest in that connection. If you want more information, you can go to unapologeticallysensitive.com. There's an HSP groups page, and you can find information about the online HSP course and everything that you need to know. If you want to get in touch with Jen or work with Jen, you can reach out to her at Jen@Heartfulness Consulting. If you have any feedback or you want to get in touch with me, you can reach out to me at unapologeticallysensitive@gmail.com. I think that's all I have. I hope you are doing well. I hope you are staying cool. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's our superpower. Have a blessed day.